Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very honored and excited to be interviewing a very special space champion, Mr. Christopher Huie. I saw Christopher Huie's journey to space and was inspired learning about his story into the aerospace sector, his work at Virgin Galactic, and even some of his outreach endeavors before becoming an astronaut and after. Christopher Huie is an astronaut, aerospace engineer, and inspirational international speaker. Christopher has been with Virgin Galactic since 2016, Richard Branson's human spaceflight company, and has contributed to the company in a variety of impactful ways we'll go into today. His contributions to the emerging commercial human spaceflight industry include 6 years of leadership in the flight sciences external loads engineering discipline, supporting both the design and operation of the air-launched spaceflight system. As a mission specialist on Unity 25, he played a key role in Virgin Galactic's final test spaceflight, paving the way for the first commercial spaceflight mission, Galactic 01. A Jamaican American, Christopher is one among the first 650 humans to venture into space, the 19th Black astronaut, and the first Jamaican astronaut. So, as you can see, Christopher is a visionary leader who's paving the way for so many young students to enter the aerospace sector, and I'm incredibly honored to learn about his journey to where he is today. So, welcome, Christopher. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure. I'm excited to get into the conversation.
Yeah, I have to start off. I watched your flight to space, and that is a goal that many people I feel like dream and aspire to get to go to space. And so I have to start off asking about that experience. When you achieved this monumental goal that you had in life to maybe go to space one day, it could be really surreal. So what was your initial reaction when you found out that you will be able to go to space? And what were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I was very surprised. So when I first got the call, it was really just a call of like, would you be interested in doing this? And it was one of the executives at the company that called me. And he's like, well, this is the fun part of the job, Chris. Usually when we make these calls, well, I don't make these calls often, but some of the times that I've been called by the executives, it's not always good news. And so I didn't know what to expect when one of our executives was like, hey, you have time to talk? And you're like, oh, which way is this going to go? And he was like, he started the call by saying, this is the fun part of the job. And he asked, would you be interested in being a mission specialist on one of our upcoming space flights? And my jaw dropped. And I was just like, whoa. Certainly, working for a human spaceflight company, your odds are significantly better than working at any other job, really, for trying to go to space. So I knew it was a possibility, but I didn't think it was a probability. But nevertheless, something I was casually working towards and hoping that maybe one day I would be in the right place at the right time. Um, but yeah, then, a little while after that initial call, I got the call again from one of our executives that said, okay, we know what flight you're going to be on. Here's the timeline. Are you still interested? And that's when things got real. Before it was like, are you interested? I'm excited. And now it's like, we have a flight date. We know what we're ready to do it finally. And that was really quite surreal. So honored and privileged to be able to, serve the company in that way. But it was an amazing experience and quite the surprise.
Wow, I can see like the joy in your face and how special of a moment that must have been for you. And when you finally got to launch, what were you expecting? How was the training procedure for you? Because I know it's very different with commercial human spaceflight. So how did you prepare for it? And how was it actually experiencing microgravity and seeing Earth from this different angle, from this different perspective?
Yeah, that's a big question. So there's a couple things to note. So I flew as an employee of the company, and it was technically a test flight. So we were test. I was a mission specialist role, serving as ex, to explore and understand what the customer experience was going to be like, and so we could refine the experience overall. And so one of the test objectives of my flight was to test out whether or not we had an adequate level of training for our customers going forward. And so typically, a lot of our customers have the opportunity um, to do zero G flights or high or centrifuge training. And so one of my test objectives was to test the minimum viable training. And so we went without any of that because which was completely fine, right? And I think we proved that that is absolutely usable. I felt like ridiculously confident in the spaceflight system and the team and the training. The entire experience is really designed around accessibility. And I think that's the exciting part about commercial human spaceflight bases versus where we've been with governmental astronauts in spaceflight we've seen over the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, where it's about, excluding people based on, health, skills, whatever it may be. But for the commercial sector, it's really about how can we include you? And so the experience is very accommodating as a result. And so the training is about 3 days for most missions. Certainly, there's a medical intake, and you work with our aerospace medicine team to assess where you are in your health journey and how we'll be able to accommodate you, wherever that may be. Um, so the journey's awesome. The training's about 3 days. Virgin Galactic launches out of Spaceport America in New Mexico, often called the Land of Enchantment. Beautiful landscape. But the journey itself is super fun. The first day of training, you're really just getting to know your equipment, the things that you're wearing on your body, um, safety equipment. There's a lot of time spending getting in and out of your preparing to get in and out of your seat and buckling your harness and all of that and your safety equipment, going through emergency procedures, um, things like that. Getting into a seat in zero gravity is non-trivial. So, and it's really important to a suborbital mission that you get back to your seat because the G forces are significant. Um, but yeah, and then my favorite day of training was probably the second day where we got to do what we call a G awareness flight, where we go up with our pilots in a acrobatic airplane and basically see how your body is going to respond under G. And so while we don't necessarily require the centrifuge training, part of the training is certainly to experience that high G forces and understand how your body is going to behave, and then practice things like the anti-G straining maneuver where, you flex the right muscles so you don't pass out under high G. So that's kind of like the gist of the training. There's also a cabin trainer where you kind of to a certain extent, the experience is choreographed, so you know who's going to be in what part of the cabin when, because the microgravity experience is it's limited, but it's also like a confined area, so you want to make sure that everyone's getting the best experience possible, and not like you don't want a foot in your face when you're trying to like look at the Earth for the first time, right? Um, but that experience is awesome and fun. Training is really confidence building, and then on top of that, like I could go on and on and on about the spaceflight experience itself, but getting to ride a rocket. And Virgin Galactic has a very specific, very unique spaceflight system, being a rocket-powered glider. Launches horizontally, lands horizontally. The acceleration is just ridiculous. It's so cool. Going from, you pull about 2 Gs, 2 to 3 Gs as you accelerate. And then as you head up to space, you max about maybe like four and change Gs. Acceleration is awesome, just paints a smile on your face. And then the view of the Earth is just absolutely spectacular. I got some advice from some friends and aspiring astronauts who were, there's a lot of mental preparation. While the training itself is is intentionally limited for a commercial experience, there's a lot of mental preparation to, how are you going to take advantage of your handful of minutes in microgravity in space and prepare yourself to receive whatever you're going to feel in that moment. So there's a lot of feels. I'll pause there and see if you want to dive in anywhere.
Wow. Yeah, no, I mean, first off, knowing that the training is condensed almost into 3 days, but also knowing your mission objective of trying to find what the minimal preparation you'll need is, I think is a very important, consideration that we need to make medically to understand what is necessary, what is like needed for humans to be able to go to space. And as we get more people to travel to space, we need to really understand that, that how different types of training can impact the experience of going to space. So it was wonderful to hear a little bit about your mission as well as how it felt like going to space. Did you experience the mental preparation of going to space? So before we kind of dive a little bit into your career specifically, I'm curious, did you feel the overview effect? I know that's mentioned by many astronauts, and we kind of talked about it at the Space Education Summit, but I'm curious, did you have that feeling where you came back down to Earth and you had this revelation or like this, new thought process of how the world or our planet is?
I have a mixed answer to that. So I think yes and no. Yes, I certainly, today I would 100% say I've experienced the overview effect. I have a theory or my concept on the overview effect is I think it exists on a spectrum, and I think how we talk about it colloquially, the expectation is that it's this discrete event. You go to space and the overview effect is achieved. And my theory is that I don't think you need to go to space to experience the overview effect, right? At its heart, the overview effect is having this profound sense of connectedness with the Earth, the people, and understanding the fragility of our environment and the planet, and how our ecosystems behave, and how humanity and other species interact with each other, right? You can study that on Earth, you can experience that on Earth. You can believe the things you read, understand the scientific process, right? There's things you can do to get that mindset. So I think for me, going to space confirmed all the things that I believed relative to that mindset, because now it's firsthand experience. I'm not reading something in theory or reading an academic paper or right, hearing someone from a news article or something like that. So it's certainly firsthand experience. But also, I think it exists on a spectrum. So the further you are away from that mindset before you travel to space, my theory is the more discrete or instantaneous that overview effect will occur to you after you have traveled to space. My go-to example for this is if you've seen the video of William Shatner when he came off of the Blue Origin capsule, and he was just like, you can tell he was still having a big moment after what he just saw 10 minutes ago up in space. And I would hypothesize that maybe he was further away from the overview mindset prior to his space flight, and that gave him like this very existential moment where he was kind of like in a little bit of a mental crisis, trying to figure out how to process what he saw because it was so surprising and unexpected. For those of us who are in the industry constantly and see this and study this, I think it would be harder to kind of have that certainly mind-blowing moment, at least for me. So for me, it's maybe more ethereal or academic, not necessarily academic, but it took a longer time period for me to really dissect all the different things that I experienced. And every time I talk about it, I kind of learn something new about my own experience. And so, yeah, that's my theory on the overview effect.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I've actually never heard that specific take on it, and I understand where you're coming from, completely because you do hear of this in like basically every astronaut talk or like a conference, and you just start like learning about it if you're in the aerospace industry. So you probably have a different experience because you've learned so much about it from other people's perspectives than someone who's never heard of it or barely has a limited knowledge or exposure to this idea of the overview effect. I'm sure the outcomes of that experience are quite different. So yeah, no, that's very interesting. And I know I read a little bit about your work, and you originally worked on helicopters and not specifically in rockets. And so I'm a little bit curious about your journey. What led you? Well, first, what was your aha moment to pursuing to be an engineer? How did that journey go for you? And what specifically led you into the aviation space and then Virgin Galactic?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'd say my aha moment was probably when I was about 12 or 13. I was watching a lot of documentaries on aerospace, and I just became obsessed with helicopters. I thought they were the coolest thing. The fact that, flying at all is very cool, right? Rockets are cool, airplanes are cool, they go fast, they go high. But helicopters were like a really interesting anomaly in all of that because they can fly like an airplane, but they can also stop, hover, go up, down, backwards, left, right. I think it was really fascinating just the versatility and like what's even going on there, right? You look at a helicopter, if you don't know much about aerospace, you figure like the rotor blades are doing something, right? But like what is really going on there? And it's like you take all of aerospace engineering and then you just start spinning it. And that's what a helicopter is. And I thought that was really cool. And I wanted to just really dive in on what that was. I also kind of got interested in flying um, remote controlled helicopters. I didn't get to do it very much as a kid, but I always wanted to do it. And then a lot of my inspiration was stemmed from just an interest in science fiction as a kid. I'm a Star Trek nerd. Um, you can't really see it up behind me, but one of the things I took to space, it's going to be blurred in the background, but some of the things I took to space were I took the crew of the Starship Enterprise in Lego in my pocket, because those are my two like main inspirations from my childhood days, watching Star Trek and playing with Legos. So that was a big deal for me. So I'd say that was kind of like my main inspiration. There's a lot of different ways to tell that tale, but how I got interested in how I pivoted from helicopters to spaceships. When I was in high school and college, I thought my big goal, my big dream was to be a helicopter engineer. And so I achieved that. I did that, graduated with my Bachelor of Science in Aerospace Engineering from the University of Maryland. Got a chance to do some undergraduate research while I was there in the Rotorcraft Center of Excellence. That was really cool. And so I worked at a helicopter company, several of them actually. And one of my mentors while I was working on this tilt rotor project called the V280, manufactured by Bell Helicopter. I was one of the loads engineers on that project. And then one of my mentors was big into space, but also loved helicopters. He ended up getting laid off from Bell. It's a fact of life in the aerospace industry, especially when it's tied to defense spending with the government. So ebbs and flows in the industry. But he ended up getting a job in Virgin Galactic. Like he decided he was going to take this as an opportunity to follow his passion for space, and move from Texas to California. And then we kept in touch. And then one day he was like, "Hey, Chewy, you got to come out here and work for us." And then, long story short, I did. So I didn't think I was qualified to work in the space industry because my bachelor's degree, I did a specialization in aeronautics, and so at University of Maryland, there's kind of a two-track system. Your junior year, you basically go for air track or space track. I did air track since I was interested in helicopters. And so I didn't think I could like just jump into the space industry. But as luck would have it, I found the only aerospace company going to space with airplanes. And so, and it turns out, if you know the fundamentals of first principles in physics, F equals ma, and no matter where you go, as long as you're considerably slower than the speed of light, otherwise relativistic effects get in there, but we won't get into that. Yeah, and so I had a strong understanding of the fundamentals and was able to understand and came to lead the team that I got hired on over several years. And that's kind of the short version of the story of how I got into helicopters and how I got into the space industry.
Nice. I mean, it's funny how kind of life takes you where you're supposed to belong or where it makes you excited each time with whatever you're working on. So that's pretty incredible. And during your introduction, I mentioned how you were the first Jamaican astronaut to go to space. And also, I'm sure like your journey inspires young students, even adults, I'm sure across the world. And so looking at your journey, did you have parents who were in this field? And if not, if you were the first one kind of navigating the space, what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome? And do you have any advice for students academically trying to follow a similar path as you? How did you kind of trek your way? I know it's a different answer for everyone because everyone's path is so different, but I'm curious how that path went for you and if you have any obstacles that you overcame or any advice that you would provide to students who want to go a similar pathway as you.
So to answer your first question, no one in my family was into STEM per se. It was really a very new endeavor for me. My mom raised my sister and I by herself, single mom, although I did see my dad often over school breaks and things like that. But yeah, I think I just drew a liking to it from watching documentaries and playing and watching sci-fi things. And so I decided that was something I wanted to do. My educational environment and the peers that I knew, like I didn't really have any role models to follow. I didn't even meet an engineer, I think, until I was probably like 16. Someone who was actually actively doing, I think it was at a career day thing at my high school. Um, so I didn't have a lot of role models or mentors to really guide me. I did have a handful, but none of them who were actually doing the thing that I wanted to go do. And so it was a lot of blazing trails, and as a result of that, those were the obstacles that kind of set themselves up for me. Um, my sister and I were the first to go into college from our family for the most part. And so my older sister, I should say, so she's about five, she's 6, 7 years older than me. And so she was kind of helping me along the path as she was learning it as well. But just getting into figuring out what college, getting into figuring out financial aid, all of that, those were big obstacles. The I grew up in Florida, in Central Florida, and somehow I decided, and I can't really remember why it ended up being the case, but I only applied to two schools. It was Johns Hopkins and University of Maryland. So one way or another, I was going to the state of Maryland for some reason. University of Maryland was my first choice because Johns Hopkins doesn't have an aerospace program. Um, so I ended up getting admitted to University of Maryland, but I wasn't admitted to the engineering school. And so that was kind of like the first obstacle that I had. I was like, well, I got the school I wanted to go into, but I'm not in the aerospace program. So I got admitted under an undecided major. They call it letters and sciences. And so I had to basically transfer into the aerospace department um, after I was there. So I had to take some classes to, meet the minimum criteria. That was probably the one of the first obstacles. Also in high school, I was in an honors program, and one of my teachers accused me of plagiarism, which I don't think I did, but I never got a chance to refute it. And so my junior year, I got an F on my final paper. I got a C in the class as a result of that. And then I got dropped out of the honors program because you had to keep a minimum threshold of your grades. And so I thought my life was over at that point. And here I am, 17 years old, thinking my life is over before it even begins. Um, and so that was the first obstacle. And the second obstacle was not getting admitted to the aerospace program. Um, and so a couple of those after that, but like you said before, things kind of happen the way they're supposed to happen to take you on your journey. Um, my sophomore year of college, I did end up getting into the aerospace program the second semester. However, I was now a year behind in my major. And so it took me 5 years to graduate with my undergrad, so I had an extra year. But it all worked out, right? So I applied to a scholarship program through a company called Sikorsky Aircraft. They build helicopters in New York, not too far from you. Sorry, not New York, they're in Connecticut, Stratford, Connecticut. And it was an awesome scholarship program targeted at minority students. It was a 3-year program. The first year they paid for 50% of your tuition. The second year was 75% of your tuition. And the third year was 100% of your tuition. So it was like this godsend at the end, like this extra year of college. And my last year of college was fully paid for by the scholarship program. And I also got to intern in Connecticut at this helicopter company, gave me a lot of great experience, hands-on. And I actually got to get exposed to like one of my favorite helicopters that actually inspired me to enter the aerospace industry altogether. So that was cool. That sort of becomes important because that scholarship program ends up being the foundation and the inspiration for the scholarship program I started at Virgin Galactic several years ago. And then I also had the chance to study abroad with an extra semester. So I studied abroad in Australia and ended up meeting the person who I'm now married to, right? So um, all of those obstacles ended up turning into opportunities, and those are the obstacles that have literally defined who I am and what I do today. And they kind of all these things kind of spiral into each other in a synergistic way, where a scholarship program I created gave me an opportunity to win Virgin Group Employee of the Year and go to a leadership summit on Richard Branson's private island in Necker Island. And I met a bunch of other cool people that allowed me to do other cool things, and that put me on the radar for the leadership team and ended up, becoming a spokesperson for the company in some regards. Which I'm not today, just to be clear, but had a lot of opportunities to speak for the company. So yeah, that's the journey. Those are some of the obstacles, but the obstacles are part of the journey. I know you asked another question, but I'll pause there to see if you want to go anywhere else.
No, I mean, first off, I want to say thank you so much for being really honest because I think so many students, including myself, can relate with at least one thing you just said. And it's really hard to like look at someone's bio or accomplishments and kind of be like, oh, this person is so accomplished. They probably had it easy throughout their whole entire life. They're probably like geniuses, and they are, but they also have a story. And I think sometimes we forget that story. And it's so powerful when you do hear it because there are many aspects to it which we can relate to, especially the first thing you mentioned about high school and college. Right now, like being in that same age group, and a lot of our students are as well. You think if one thing happens or one obstacle occurs, your whole life is over. Like you just think at 17, everything is done. Like, and now I won't achieve this, or this. And you just kind of stop yourself. And I think first, like you said, I don't know what exactly was that motivation that you maybe internally had, but reminding ourselves that it's not over there and you can still keep pursuing your path, you don't have to give up, is a really, really important thing. And I think some students take it as a sign of, oh, I'm not supposed to pursue this thing. Let me pivot and do something else that maybe is, supposed to be what I'm doing, like I'm supposed to do. It's so easy to give up on your dreams when obstacles like this occur, but then just keep going is so important. And as you can see with your journey, everything kind of worked out as you just kept following your heart. And not every moment was easy, as you were saying, but you worked towards it, which I mean is very inspiring to me because I'm currently in kind of similar shoes in college. So I'm sure many students who are listening can really take a lot from your story. So really thank you for being so honest because there are not many people who share their complete stories. It means a lot to us. And, for students who may right now be looking to specifically get their foot in the door, you mentioned a few scholarship opportunities or, a few things that really helped propel your career forward. Do you have any specific advice for people who are looking for mentors or want to reach out for a mentor or maybe want to apply for a scholarship opportunity outside of their university? Do you have any advice on approaching these opportunities? Are there any names that come out to you? Or are there any like networking advice that you would give students or hacks, for them to find these mentors as well as find these scholarship opportunities or internship experiences?
Yeah, I have a lot of comments on that one. Probably won't get to all of them, but um, going back to that thing you said before, I think, it's the obstacles that end up defining the interesting part of your journey. And it's super cliche, but like it's the journey, not necessarily the destination. And having a really big, audacious goal is great and important. Um, and but there's like a really, really good chance that how you have planned to achieve that goal will not be the path that you take to achieving that goal. And so it's knowing that I have the goal, I know the destination, but I don't know how I'm going to get there. But the steps that you take to get there, when you start to get knocked down or pushed backwards, like if you admit to yourself up front that I don't actually know the path. And so if I take a step and that step ends up being bad or wrong, now I know how not to get there. And that's part of the path of figuring out how to get there. It's not necessarily a failure. You just have to admit that you don't know how to get to where you're trying to go. And you have to experiment, ask for help, and things like that. So I think that dovetails into your other question about advice and mentorship and what programs are out there to help. One of my lessons learned, like looking back at my own history, is I wish I had been more capable of asking for help when I needed it. I used to think that if I failed something or didn't have the outcome that I expected, that there was something wrong with me and I was stupid. And I was a huge confidence problem, and a lot of imposter syndrome ensued after that. And so certainly you have an ability to control your own destiny by how much you study and prepare and understand how you learn things and then work towards putting yourself in a good environment to optimize your own learning. Um, but like no one does anything alone, and I think we have to remember that we're not individuals when it comes to accomplishing things. We're a society, we're a culture, we're a team, right? There's no one's built a rocket like a human rocket, a space rocket, or a satellite rocket by themselves. No one's built designed a full airplane and certified it by themselves. Like we all have specific specialties, and it might just be you figuring out what your specialty needs to be. On the other side of it, so I think mentorship is really important. It's one of my passions. I mentor several students and early career professionals and kind of all over the spectrum. One of my passions. And it was something that someone told me early on in my career. I'd never really had a mentor. Um, Probably didn't even have my first mentor until like 7 or 8 years ago, if even that, maybe like 5 years ago, like a formal mentor relationship. My first boss that hired me after my first job was like, Chris, you really should find a mentor. He was my technical mentor in a lot of ways, but he was inspiring me to like find other like diverse opinions. And so I think that's if you're gonna find a mentor, like find at least two. And remember that a mentor isn't there to tell you what to do. A mentor there is um, to show you a path to achieve something that you may like, something that's similar to that you want to achieve. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing that your mentor did, but even better if they're aligned with your own goals and visions. But having a diversity of opinions and thought is really helpful because your mentor may have done something this way and another mentor may have done it another way. And that gives you the context and the experience to know that there's multiple ways to accomplish the same goal or a similar goal, and that the way you need to accomplish it probably isn't just one way, right? Um, I think when you're early career or like doing internships from a college or a collegiate experience, it's an awesome experience because you get carte blanche. Um, you're in a learning environment. You're getting an internship to learn. And so you're not supposed to know everything. So you kind of have this opportunity to just make a lot of dumb mistakes and ask a lot of questions and just be a sponge and learn as much as you can from everyone as possible. I think that requires a certain amount of boldness and assertiveness to go out and ask those questions. And even in the academic environment, by talking to your professors outside of class, they're not just there to teach you; they're there to educate you. And so, if you can start to delineate between teaching and educate, teaching is a very transactional experience in the classroom and in the discussion and recitation sessions. But education is, let's just learn what you're doing. Can I be a part of your research? Can you just tell me what research you're doing? What papers have you written? Would you take me under your wing? Can I be in your lab? Can I volunteer? You know, there's so many opportunities in academic environments, and billions of dollars pour into universities and colleges outside of the classroom. If you realize that things that are happening at your school, a lot of it happens outside of the classroom that you can also get involved in, clubs. And that kind of dovetails into your networking question. You've got University of Maryland, at least, there was a human-powered helicopter project. There was a balloon satellite project. And then it's a research institution. So there's a neutral buoyancy tank, the largest collegiate neutral buoyancy tank in the country. There's an autonomous MAV, micro air vehicle lab, swarms, it's all these different research things that are happening. And so it's like, just go talk to your professors and see what they're interested in. You're going to learn a whole lot more than you will just outside of the classroom or inside the classroom. And that creates the context for you to apply the things you are learning in the classroom, because it's so much easier to learn something when you have a useful application that excites you and inspires you. In terms of programs, my favorite ones are the Patty Grace Smith Fellowship for Students of Color, Brooke Owens. I think you're very familiar with the Brooke Owens Fellowship, I'm sure. That one's awesome, great board. And then Matthew Izakowicz. I think there's a lot of good programs out there. In terms of other advice, I'd say just apply. Like, apply to as many things as you can, because either if that's a scholarship or a program or a job, like, you're going to miss out on every opportunity that you don't apply to. That's guaranteed. But if you at least apply, put your foot forward, that's something to consider. On the side of, like, one thing I learned a couple of years ago was really, really interesting in terms of, like, diversity between male applicants and female applicants to job positions is female applicants to job positions are, like, significantly less likely to apply to a job if they don't meet all of the qualifications listed in the job description. Men do not have that problem, if you will, right? So basically that means men are more likely to apply to jobs that they're not fully qualified for. And as a result, more men are getting the jobs because that's what's happening in the numbers. But really, once you understand this stereotype and this bias, right? Like, it's okay, just apply. All they can say is no, right? And sometimes they'll say yes, especially if you're qualified. So just something to think about.
Definitely. I mean, there was just so much there. I think first with the aspect of multiple mentors is something important, something I think many of us don't realize the importance of getting those diverse perspectives, even with mentors who are not in the same field as ours. But even what you were mentioning, about taking every opportunity, I think that's something I personally can really relate with. I mean, you're going to get a lot of rejections, but as you said, there could be that one yes that completely changes your life. So really take advantage of every opportunity you see that seems like something you would want to be involved in. You never know what does work out. And I think that advice is something that goes such a long way. And so I think many of us can at least take one aspect of what you were just saying there. There was just a lot packed in, a lot of wonderful advice for students and adults who want to, like, maybe pivot careers, find a mentor, or, even enter, a certain aspect of a career. Finding a way to transition and put yourself into those rooms is really important. And so I think a lot of your advice applies to everyone, regardless of what stage of their career they're in. So I think those are all the questions we really had for today. And I want to thank you so much for your time today, Christopher. It was such an honor to hear about your journey. I think seeing your space flight to now getting some context into your inspiring journey, your background and how you pursued, to become an engineer and how your journey went on from there is something a lot of us can relate with, especially how you ignited your passion for the helicopter and engineering through Star Trek. I think a lot of us grew up watching Star Trek Trek or Star Wars and love science fiction. So I think many of us who are in the shoes you once were in a few years ago can really, really resonate with your story. And I'm sure we'll be following along on all of your incredible work. And hopefully some of us can continue to step in your and follow in your footsteps with what you're doing. So thank you so much for taking your time to share your journey to space and a little bit about your background. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. This was a fun conversation.